Hello, my name is David Stein. I work on our business development team covering our FSX file systems. And today I'm going to be talking to you about our file storage portfolio. So if you look at the broader storage portfolio, and we're talking a lot during Pi Week of S3, obviously, but there's times where customers need to be able to store things in a traditional file structure. These can range from things like user share environments or corporate IT, where you're migrating from an on-premises network attached storage array. It could be, machine learning, high-performance compute jobs, where you still need the benefits of, a high-performance scale-out type file system. So it's important to understand what our file portfolio is, and I'll kind of give you an overview of the different offerings we have, and kind of explain how different customers use our file service offerings today. So when you think about files, there's kind of a couple main categories they fall in. Like I mentioned earlier, you've got user share environments, you have corporate app servers, you have application servers for production environments, from like websites to content management systems to e-discovery applications, as well as high performance environments that need to be able to scale out and run things like genome analysis or autonomous or machine learning. And a lot of times the files need to be shared across multiple users at the same time. So one of the main benefits of a file system is its ability to share access across dozens or thousands of servers or dozens or thousands of users at one time. So they need to be able to have the performance for multiple use cases to come in and access those files simultaneously. And the other thing that's unique about file data is that it just continues to grow, especially if you think about the use case of user shares or home directories, where administrators have little insight as to what that data is. They just know that they need to keep growing the file system. And over years, that data continues to grow and grow and grow. So they need file systems to be able to scale quickly without dealing with the limitations of on-premises hardware. Now, when it comes to managing this file storage on premises, there's a couple key challenges that customers tell us they face. And they fall into the three general buckets of time, cost, and complexity. So with cost, we'll start with, you've got the upfront initial expenses to acquire the hardware and software. There's ongoing management and maintenance warranties and maintenance renewals, as well as hardware refreshes, adding on drives, not to mention all the data center costs that go along with it. And then on the time aspect, it does require a lot of, on the scalability aspect, I should say, it requires a lot of effort to scale and add additional capacity. So if you didn't add enough capacity to begin with, you might be sitting on a time frame of weeks to months to add new drives. Or maybe the controllers you bought for your initial array didn't support the amount of drives you want to add, so you have to go through a hefty upgrade. As well as just the general time it takes to implement and procure the hardware and get everything going in the first place. And then there's the ongoing overhead, right? So once the on-premises file storage is up and running, the maintenance to keep it up to date is where customers tell us a real pain point. It's doing software updates, patches, managing their encryption, managing backups, replacing failed drives at 3 a.m. on a Sunday morning. This is all that true undifferentiated heavy lifting that customers tell us, hey, we want to be able to use something that's a little bit more seamless, that doesn't have that upfront cost, that could scale easier, and doesn't require this ongoing management overhead, especially for something that might not be core to the customer's business. And when you look at our file offerings, before we get into the individual offerings, what we tried to do is address a multitude of customer needs with having many different file protocols. So we've got offerings that cover Linux storage or NFS protocol. We've got offerings that cover Windows storage or SMB or SIS protocol. We also have different tiers and options. So this allows customers a lot of flexibility to choose exactly the right performance tier they need, but they can quickly adapt if their needs change as well. We allow you to provision additional performance and scale it up and down. We allow you to move data around pretty easily. So you've got a lot of flexibility into what you choose. You're not locked into this idea of, let me buy this big array for 3 to 4 years, and we're kind of stuck with the options there, or we may need to add on for an expensive cost later. We make it cost effective. You only pay for the storage you need. You don't have to waste all this overhead for things that you might need down the road. And then all the other benefits of the AWS cloud, right? You've got reliability and durability built in with the security measures that AWS has, with the MultiAZ offerings, being able to take advantage of different regions, as well as the different compliance protocols that we support and all the security that AWS is known for. And then it's fully managed, meaning that we continue to manage the operating system for you and the file software, so you don't have to. And then lastly, we offer the global reach and availability that you would expect from any AWS service. So you could easily deploy file systems in multiple regions throughout the globe to serve users in North America or Asia or Europe or wherever they may be, without having to worry about setting up and managing that separate infrastructure. Super important for customers that do have a globally dispersed workforce. So you heard me on the last slide say fully managed. And I kind of want to spend just a minute to talk about what that really means. So fully managed is one of the core tenets of our file offerings. It's what customers tell us that they really like. It's being able to offload all the management overhead of their own file servers and have AWS do it. They just want to give us the files and put it into an already provisioned or managed file system. So when you think about fully managed on the hardware side, that's an inherent capability of AWS. If you were to set up your own file servers on EC2, for example, you no longer have to worry about setting up and managing the hardware and all the stuff that goes with setting up your own data center and hardware and racking and stacking and keeping that provisioned and up and running. But the extra step is what customers are asking for, which is we don't really want to have to manage the file software. We don't want to have to install it. We don't have to do patches or updates. We don't want to have to manage things like security encryption or backups. And this is where our fully managed offerings come in. And so our portfolio today, we have three primary services that we look at. We have Amazon Elastic File System, which is our first file service we released in 2016. Then we've got two other products called Amazon FSx. So Amazon EFS is our Linux-based offering for NFS type workloads. And then on the right, we have Amazon FSx. FSx stands for File System Variable. It's a platform for third-party file systems, similar to how RDS is a platform for third-party databases. You know, we chose Windows Server to run our SMB file share because Windows has been making, or Microsoft has been making this Windows server with file sharing and the SMB protocol for decades now. So it's a very mature platform. And then for the high performance side, you know, where customers are asking us to help with media workflows or, you know, HPC jobs or machine learning where you need to scale out file performance, we chose Lustre. Lustre is a very common open source software that allows you to get really good performance. And as you continue to scale a capacity, the performance continues to scale with it. And we want to make sure that it's affordable as well, and it's got a really good TCO, especially if you're coming from on-premises environments. And if you look at our NFS-based storage, we've got the lowest price serverless file storage in the cloud, and I'll explain what serverless means in a few slides. But it starts at just 1.33 cents per gigabyte per month for our new One Zone and frequent access offering. And on the Windows side, it starts at just 1.3 cents per gigabyte per month for our single AZ HDD offering. And then on the Lustre side, you know, we've got HDD tiers that start at just 2.5 cents per gigabyte per month. So we get really good TCO with it. The important takeaway here is a lot of customers will look at the cost of their direct storage to compare against AWS. So they're comparing that middle column, direct storage, to the AWS column. But it's important to consider all the other costs that come with managing your own storage. That includes all the networking infrastructure you have to set up, the data center costs, power, cooling, and everything else that comes with it. And that true cost ends up being that column on the left, the orange column. At least I think it's orange. I'm a little colorblind. But the column all the way on the left is what you're kind of comparing to. But you know, even then, cost we find with customers isn't always the most important factor. You know, being at least cost neutral is probably table stakes. But really, I think offering that full manageability and reducing that management overhead tends to be key. So for the next handful of slides, I'm going to go over each of our services to kind of give you an idea of what the three offerings are, you know, and how customers use it, and maybe how it could help you out with some of the things that you're looking to do on AWS. We'll start with EFS. EFS is our Amazon Elastic File System. It's an elastic serverless file system. And what that means is you don't have to provision any storage. You provision the file system with a few clicks in the console, or you set up the file system, I should say, and then you just start putting data in. You only pay for the data that's in there. So you can add data, delete data. It's super elastic. It's very S3 in that sense. It's also S3-like in terms of durability. So it's spread out across multiple availability zones on the standard tier. We have a new tier I'll talk about soon. But the standard tier that's been around since its inception is going to be spread across multiple availability zones. So this makes it super elastic. It's easy to set up. It's simple, set and forget it. You know, put the files in, delete them. You're only paying for what it is. It's super performant. You know, just recently we've increased read IOPS by 5x and then read throughput by 3x. You can get up to 500,000 IOPS with our max IO mode. So we give you the capability to choose between 2 different modes when you provision a file system. It doesn't affect cost. It just affects how the performance is. So you've got a certain amount of throughput that'll come with the file system as well, or you can provision throughput independently. So you've got a lot of flexibility to how you handle capacity and performance. We start at just 1.33 cents per gigabyte per month. So it's super cost effective. Management's easy. Like I said, you set it up and you forget it. You don't have to worry about growing the file system or dealing with performance. It'll continue to scale as you add storage. It'll scale up and scale back. And then it integrates natively with a lot of our services. So like a big use case for EFS, for example, is container storage, where you need Linux-based storage. And it's really easy to use, especially if you have something like Fargate, where you could set up a serverless infrastructure. And since EFS standard is replicated between multiple availability zones, then you could have your servers, you could throw compute at whatever AZ you need it in, and that server can access the same storage regardless of what AZ it's in, because EFS has the same data already in each availability zone. So it makes it super easy to scale your workloads across multiple availability zones. Just recently, last week, we announced a new storage class. So this is really big news. Customers have been asking for this for a while. It's EFS. It's called One Zone. And so what this means is, you heard me on the last slide say EFS standard is spread across multiple availability zones. One zone leverages one availability zone. It's still durable. We still do the same replication behind the scenes. It's just within a single availability zone rather than spread out across 3. So the benefit here is that you're going to get still a high level of durability, but it's also going to offer higher performance and lower latency. So this is great for a wide variety of applications, but the important thing is it really reduces the cost as well. So it gives you better performance and lower cost for those workloads that could benefit from it. And if we look at how this compares when we stack the 2 offerings side by side, is you have the One Zone offering, or actually before we talk about the zones again, we also have lifecycle management. So with EFS, you can set a lifecycle policy where your data is put down into an infrequent access tier after it's been there certain days. And we could set that by 7, 14, 30, 60, 90 days. You've got flexibility when you create the file system. We'll automatically lifecycle that storage down to a colder storage tier called infrequent access. And so what this means is, if 20% of your data is hot and lives in the primary tier, and then 80% is colder and it gets lifecycled down into the infrequent access tier, you get a blended rate of just 4.3 cents per gigabyte per month for the One Zone offering and 8 cents per gigabyte per month for the standard offering. And keep in mind, you're not provisioning storage either. So you don't have this overhead of extra storage that you provision for. So the effective rate is actually even cheaper when you compare it to like setting up your own on, say, EC2 and EBS. So it's a really cost-effective solution. And the use cases we see with One Zone are development environments, WordPress sites, secondary data where you have backup data or secondary copies, as well as various type of development workflows. So it's a really good feature for customers that don't need that multi-AZ support. For example, you would want that multi-AZ standard offering if you had that serverless kind of Fargate use case I mentioned earlier. But if you're doing a small test dev environment, or you've got a WordPress site where you just want to keep it in a single availability zone, you've got that option now too. An example of a customer for EFS is we chose Ancestry to highlight here. There's a bunch more on our website. Ancestry is great because they migrated from on-premises network attached storage. And they were able to do this in a way that was completely seamless to their users while still giving the same performance and capacity that they need. One of their big pain points with all these data science environments for their genomics workflows is, hey, we're tired of the time and effort it takes to scale the file systems. And they love with EFS that it'll just scale as they add data in and then scale back down as they delete data. So it was a really awesome use case for Ancestry, who's a global leader in family history and genomics, to be able to migrate and leverage more file storage in the cloud for use cases where S3 might not be an appropriate fit for this type of data. Second up on the order, we've got Amazon FSx for Windows File Server. So you remember FSx is our platform for third-party file systems, and this is built on a Windows operating system. So what this means is that it's fully managed. We set it up for you, but you get all the same features you would expect from a fully managed Windows file system, including Windows ACLs, NCFS permissions, Active Directory integration, everything that you'd be doing yourself. This is for use cases like home directories, also referred to as user shares, or team shares or department shares, where you might have a G drive or F drive in your corporate network serving out files. It could be content management systems that use a lot of unstructured data, virtual desktop environments like our workspaces or maybe a Citrix VDI environment, and then also SQL databases that need high availability. So we see SQL use cases that need clustering, where their SQL servers need to access shared file storage that's highly durable and available. And FSX is great for that because we provide this multi-AZ offering that allows your SQL servers and different AZs to be able to access the files. So it's a great offering for SMB file shares. It serves general purpose as well as high performance workloads. We see everything from, like I said, user shares to HPC grid applications, media editing workflows, and everything kind of in between. You've got a lot of flexibility with the types of offerings that I'll jump into here in the next few slides. And the important thing is that when you're migrating from like a Windows file share on premises, you don't have to worry about changing these things because we're built on Windows. We have all the Active Directory integration, permissions, and settings that you would expect, as well as integration with things like DFS namespace servers. The offerings that we have today come in either single AZ or multi-AZ. So when you provision an FSX file system, you choose how much capacity you want, whether you want it to be SSD or HDD, and then you choose whether you want single AZ or multi-AZ. So our single AZ offering is durable, but it lives within a single AZ. You can have multi-AZ where we automatically replicate the data between two AZs, and we'll handle all the failover and failback. It's totally managed by us, as all you have to do is check a box when you set up the file system. And then we provide durable protection through local snapshots on the file system, which allow you to do file and folder level recovery, as well as long-term backups on Amazon S3, which give you that 11 nines of durability and the ability to restore into a different AZ. And this is kind of meant for more long-term compliance. Our SSD offering is great for IOPS-driven workloads. Again, that's going to be your like analysis type workflows, HPC grid applications, media, entertainment, kind of workflows where you just need a lot of IOPS. It's priced at 13 cents per gigabyte per month for single AZ and 23 cents per gigabyte per month for multi-AZ. So you get twice the storage for less than twice the cost, and there's no additional data transfer cost between AZs. That's all part of the cost here. And then HDD is 1/10 the price. And it's not just for cold storage. We see a lot of customers coming onto HDD. Some of them even came from SSD on premises, just because maybe their SSD drives were a couple years old, or maybe it's because we have an in-memory cache. And so we have a lot of files that are commonly read that might be cached on the file server behind the scenes that we manage for you that might be coming out of SSD anyway, even though you're provisioning HDD. So you get really good performance. It's 1/10 the cost. This is great for all your general purpose workloads or your user share environments at 1.3 cents and 2.5 cents per gigabyte per month. And we also can enable data deduplication. So your effective rate's cut in half. For example, if you have a 100 terabyte workload and you only needed 50 terabyte volume because you can get 50% data dedupe, your effective rate for a single AZ offering is now under a penny per gigabyte per month. Two examples I'll walk through super quick. One is Emirates. Emirates had their production booking platform. This is their website. It was available in multiple different languages. They had tons of websites to be able to support this, but this is their core booking platform where users go in and book airline tickets. They wanted to migrate that to AWS, and they had to do it without downtime. And FSX made it easy because their content management system needed shared file storage. And so they're able to easily migrate like for like from on-prem to AWS without having to refactor their or re-architect their data. And they're able to fail over and see a 37% increase in performance. A second one is more user share oriented, but we had venerable and annuity. They had big financial files, Excel files that needed to be shared by users. And they set up a workspaces environment for a lot of their remote users and their corporate users. They put a environment where they just map their G drive or whatever it was to their corporate users to be able to easily share these files. And it gave them all the features they had before, but it was fully managed. And they're able to get really good performance out of it as well. So these are large files that need to be processed to do things like risk analysis. So they're able to do this super seamlessly and allow them to vacate their data center as part of a larger migration 6 months earlier, saving them quite a bit of money. Last but not least, we've got high performance storage. So here we're going to talk a little bit about Amazon FSX for Lustre. Before we jump into that, it's good to level set what we mean by high performance storage. So if you look at the column on the left, most traditional file storage has a single compute or controller, or maybe there's multiple for durability, But as you add more capacity, all the performance is going through that controller. And so you can add more capacity, but at some point you're going to reach a limit about the amount of throughput that you can have in it. And if you look at the right-hand side, what you see is a scale-out architecture, where every time you add disk, you're also adding compute to it. So you're able to get performance linearly as you keep growing. So this is super important for high-performance applications that need a lot of performance. So what we introduced here was Amazon FSx for Lustre. Lustre, if you're not familiar, it's an open source scale-out file system. If you're not familiar with it, it's not important. The important thing is that we have a high-performance scale-out file system where the more capacity you add, the more performance you're going to get. You can have a petabyte of data with 200 gigabytes per second of throughput. You could have a terabyte of data with 200 megs per second of throughput if you use our Scratch file system. So it just depends on how much storage you have, and you'll be able to scale that performance linearly. So you could throw as much compute as you want for a job, and our storage will be able to keep up. We have 3 offerings. We have our HDD persistent tier, which is great for throughput-driven workloads. It scales at 12 megabytes per second per terabyte per month, starting at 2.5 cents per gigabyte per month. We have SSD persistent storage. So this is great for file workloads that need to be on all the time. This is used for like SAS grid and machine learning and autonomous type applications. Latency sensitive, IOPS driven. We've got 3 different performance tiers to choose from, all with their own price point. And the last side, which is the most interesting, I think, as it relates to Pi Day or Pi Week, where we talk about S3, is our Scratch offering. Amazon FSx for Lustre can integrate natively with S3. And our Scratch offering is great for that use case. You get really high performance and at a pretty low price. And so this is where we see use cases easily scale up into the hundreds of gigabytes per second of throughput. All of them can scale this way, but we see it with Scratch workloads where it's kind of more temporary in nature. And what we mean by that is, this is 2 different kind of use cases of how customers use FSx for Lustre today. One is this persistent, always-on file system, where all of the storage typically is going to live in the file system itself. But what the Scratch file system does, if you look at the right-hand box, is we link it to an S3 bucket. So when you provision an FSx for Lustre file system, you can optionally link it to an S3 bucket. We'll pull all the data into that file system, and then when you're done, you can put it back into S3. So the benefit is that for a lot of these jobs that we see with Lustre, like genome analysis or media editing workflows, where you just need it to be running for a few days or a few weeks, you could pull the data from S3 in what you could kind of create as like an HPC data lake, and then spit it back into S3 when you're done, tear down the file system, and you're no longer paying for it. So this is a huge value add, and it really takes advantage of a lot of the things that you're hearing about with this week of S3, of all the benefits of keeping your data into an S3 type data lake. And this is really powerful for high performance and compute-driven workloads. Really quick, I'll just touch on one case study and then wrap it up. But for Lustre, we have TRI, Toyota Research Institute. They have an autonomous division, and they're dealing with sensor data that's coming in from their autonomous cars. They need to be able to process this quickly. So they loved Amazon FSx for Lustre because it could scale their performance linearly. They're able to get really good performance, but they really like that integration with S3. They were able to reduce their object recognition learning time substantially by leveraging this type of platform. And the way they do it is they take this data from their autonomous vehicles. It gets put into this data lake environment on S3. FSx for Lustre will then pull the data in. They'll run analysis on it. And when they're done, they'll spin it back out. And they could throw as much EC2 compute as they want to finish the job. And then the Lustre file system, as long as it's provisioned big enough to give you the capacity you want, will easily be able to keep up. And it'll help run the jobs faster than you could with a traditional type of storage. And very last but not least is migration, right? So the next question is this great? We love EFS or one of our FSx file systems, but how do we get data in? For EFS and FSx for Windows, data sync is a great way to migrate data from on-premises. You could take an NFS storage thing on premises, NFS or SMB, and then set up a data sync job. You'll have an agent you install on-prem, and then point it directly towards FSx for Windows File Server or EFS, and start migrating the data over. And it'll keep all the permissions. It'll optimize all the scripts and bandwidth, so it's fully managed copy without you having to set up and managing your own scripts. And we'll do it in a highly parallel fashion to make it super performance efficient. So we recommend you take a look at this. There's also all the Snow family products for bulk transfer. There's lots of different ways to get your data into S3, into our file systems, as well as S3, which Data Sync also supports. So that's all I have for today. Thank you very much for listening, and enjoy the rest of Pi Week.